the dreaded line art, the one aspect of art that everyone despises. And I don't blame them. Line art's hard to do. Whether it's shakiness, lack of smoothness, the endless repetition of each stroke, it's frustrating and makes everyone want to avoid it. But what if I told you there are only 5 ways to make it so much easier? Without further ado, let's get started. Tip number 1, a super clean sketch. This may be a bit surprising, but believe it or not, having a super clean and neat sketch ahead of time really helps. I almost always use my final sketch as the basis for my line art. It doesn't have to have the thick and thin lines like you do for your line art, but I recommend making it clean enough so that way your final sketch looks just like how your line art will look. You may have to do this sketch or certain parts of your sketch more than once, depending on what you're drawing, but don't be discouraged if you have to do it multiple times, as it actually happens to me quite often, especially with hands. But when you do get a sketch you're happy with, you'll have a much easier time navigating each part of your drawing, especially when it comes to line art. Tip number 2, playing with pen pressure, especially in a single stroke. This is probably the most common phrase you'll hear in about every line art video you'll ever watch, and there's a reason for that. And, as encouraged in many of these videos, it's important to both have thick and thinness in about every stroke you make because it makes your art look more dynamic and appealing to the eye. The key to mastering pen pressure is to know how easy or difficult it is for you to press onto your pen or pencil, depending on what you're using to draw. I have a tendency to have a bit of a death grip on my writing and drawing utensils, and that sometimes makes my line art come out a little heavier than I want it to be. Sometimes I even forget to go lighter or add different line weights to my strokes because I'm so focused on getting the line art done. The best way for you to overcome this issue is to catch yourself doing it and then redrawing that stroke again. If you want, you can redraw on another layer and then merge it with your line art. Depending on what I'm drawing, I typically go from heavy to light in my strokes, but that also depends on what lines interact with what. But I will talk about that more specifically in another video at another time. You can also go from lightest to heaviest, but I use that sparingly. Tip number 3, density shortcuts. If you haven't mastered pen pressure or you're still practicing, then a quick shortcut you can use is changing your brush size. This makes your lighter objects and surfaces have thinner lines while your denser, heavier objects have thick lines. A good way to capture this in your work is to observe, study, or find references of your surface or object. Even just thinking about what it weighs helps. Tip number 4, your arm is your wrist. This tip may or may not be helpful to everyone, but I've definitely seen benefits from using your arm. Its main purpose is to help take the pressure off your wrist. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and give a massive disclaimer to this tip because not every tablet, medium, or workspace enables this practice too well. My typical workspace doesn't, as I have a tendency to sit on the couch and I use a really long lap desk to draw, which doesn't leave much room for my arm to move around. If you can, I'd suggest drawing on a table or desk, or maybe even setting your tablet or sketchbook upright on a stand, so that way you can use your arm more freely. You might have heard some people already include this tip in their videos, but I haven't seen anyone explain how to do it. The best way to use your arm is to focus your muscles in on either your bicep, your elbow, or your overall forearm and pretend it's your wrist. I try to apply this technique to really big curves. The key is to think of your wrist as an extension of your arm and using your arm's muscles as the main guide. Your arm might be really sore and it'll feel uncomfortable at first, but that's normal. Not only that, but I think it's actually good that your arm's a little bit sore because that means you're using your muscles and getting a little bit of a workout. During my first year of college, I had these drawing classes where we had to draw on these 18 by 24 inch sheets of paper for every assignment. Even our preliminary warm-up drawings were 18 by 24 inches. In my classes, we always had the option to either sit on these horse chairs, which had a little built-in groove for a drawing board, or on these tall stools and place our drawing boards on this big giant easel. In my first semester, my professor also encouraged us to stand while we drew if we used the easel. From there, I really got the hang of drawing with my arm and navigating its curvature in my drawings. So what do I think about drawing with your wrist? I definitely think it's a viable method and it can be really good for getting in small details. But sometimes your wrist can hurt from constantly using it, so it's always nice to have a backup technique whenever you need it. Overall, you can still use your wrist for drawing, but I would definitely make a conscious effort to try and draw with your arm and see if it generally works for you. Tip number 5, practice, aka warm-ups. Warming up before you begin drawing or doing your line art will really help you create stronger, dynamic lines, and it'll boost your line confidence. My personal favorite videos for line art warm-ups are BAM Animation and Decentra Asterix line art tutorial videos. These videos include warm-ups that address strokes, shapes, and getting the hang of using various pen pressure points. I will include both of these videos down in the description below. So that is all the tips, tricks, and techniques I have for today's video. If you liked this video or thought it was helpful, please sure to hit that like, subscribe, ring the bell, and if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave a comment down below. Bye!